1. Gong farmer, the poop collector of the ages. The job: imagine working the night shift, climbing down into cesspits, and shoveling out human waste by hand. That was the life of a gong farmer. Why it existed: cities lacked modern plumbing, so human waste collected in large pits beneath homes and public latrines. Eventually, someone had to clean them out. Work conditions: gong farmers worked at night to spare townspeople the horrifying smell and sight of the job. They used buckets and long-handled shovels to scoop out the night soil and cart it outside city walls, sometimes for use as fertilizer. Health risks: these workers were constantly exposed to disease: cholera, typhoid, dysentery, you name it. Breathing the fumes alone could cause lung damage. And if a cesspit collapsed, which happened, the worker could drown in human waste. Social status: gong farmers were treated like untouchables. Many cities prohibited them from entering markets or churches during the day. Worst part, they often had to unclog drains by hand. No tools, just hands. 2. Leech collector, medicinal bloodsucker magnet. The job: in an era where people believed illness was caused by an imbalance of humors, bloodletting was a go-to cure. And leeches? They were the medieval syringe. How it worked: leech collectors waded into marshes, ponds, and swamps, sometimes up to their waists, letting leeches latch onto their bare legs. Once engorged, they'd peel them off and store them in jars. Dangers: blood loss from too many leeches, bacterial infections, and even drowning if one passed out or slipped in the water. Animal cruelty alert: some collectors used livestock as bait, tying up horses or pigs and letting leeches feast before collecting them. Pay: abysmally low. You'd risk life and limb for a handful of pennies. 3. Fuller, the pea-soaked wool worker. The job: before your favorite wool sweater could be soft and fluffy, it had to be fulled. That meant soaking it in vats of stale urine and stomping on it to remove grease and impurities. Why urine? Urine contains ammonia, which acts as a cleaning agent, so naturally they used it in bulk. Work environment: fullers would often trudge barefoot in waist-high tubs of fetid urine for hours. Health hazards: burns from ammonia, lung issues from the fumes, and foot infections from prolonged contact. Social stigma: not quite as low as a gong farmer, but certainly not respected. You were literally begging people for their pee. Bonus horror: some towns had urine donation barrels. Fullers had to go around collecting public pee like medieval garbage men. 4. Executioner, the man no one wanted to be around the job. Executioners were responsible for beheadings, hangings, flayings, dismemberments, and tortures like the rack, Iron Maiden, or boiling alive. It was justice, medieval style. Psychological toll: many executioners drank heavily, suffered nightmares, and were emotionally scarred. Killing became routine, but it never became easy. No respect. Despite doing what the law demanded, they were often treated as social pariahs. Some cities banned them from living within the walls. Risk of revenge: botch an execution, like taking too many swings to behead someone, and a riot could break out. Hidden reality: some executioners doubled as torturers and gravediggers. Others cleaned the blood-soaked platforms after their own work. 5. Plague barrier, the Walking Dead of the Black Death. The job: when the Black Death swept through Europe, killing over a third of the population, someone had to dispose of the bodies. That someone was the plague barrier. Tools of the trade: a shovel, a wheelbarrow, and maybe a crude mask filled with herbs, which did nothing. Conditions: corpse collectors often worked around the clock, tossing plague-ridden bodies into mass graves or burning piles. They were surrounded by decay, disease, and despair. Survival rate: abysmal. Most buriers died within weeks, either from the plague itself or exhaustion. Dark truth: some plague buriers were criminals offered the job in exchange for temporary freedom. They performed their duty in chains and often died in them. 6. Whipping boy, the prince's personal punching bag. The job: Since royal children were considered too sacred to be punished, someone else took their beatings. That someone was the whipping boy. Daily horror. If the young prince misbehaved, his tutor would flog the whipping boy in front of him, hoping the prince would feel guilty enough to change. Emotional trauma. Many whipping boys were raised alongside the prince and considered him a friend. Imagine being beaten for something your best friend did, and him watching silently. No way out. Refusing wasn't an option. This was considered an honor, and one could not say no to royal duty. Cruel irony. A few became minor nobles later in life. Most were just left psychologically shattered. 7. Rat catcher, vermin, slayer of the plague years. The job, before pest control, there were rat catchers, men and sometimes boys, who hunted vermin, spreading disease across medieval towns. Work tools, dogs, traps, smoke, nets, or just their bare hands. Risky business. Rat bites often led to sepsis, infection, or even plague. Fleas from rats carried deadly bacteria. Sketchy practices. Because they were paid by the rat, some catchers secretly bred rats to increase their haul. That's right, rat farming was a thing. Infamous example. Peter the Rat Man reportedly died from an infected bite. His death was used in early pest control manuals as a cautionary tale. 8. Alchemist's assistant, poisoned in the name of gold. The job. Alchemy was the forerunner of chemistry. Alchemists hoped to turn the lead into gold and discover the elixir of immortality. Their assistants were the unlucky souls who helped them. Toxic dangers. Assistants handled mercury, arsenic, and sulfur with zero protection. They inhaled fumes, mixed powders, and tested potions. Explosions. Early lab experiments frequently blew up. Many assistants were maimed or killed. Delusional masters. Some alchemists believed they had magical powers and forced assistants to drink bizarre concoctions. Fate. Most died young, if not from poison, then from constant exposure to chemical fumes. 9. Treadmill operator, the human hamster wheel. The job, before electricity, people-powered machinery, like cranes and mills, with tread wheels. These giant hamster wheels had to be walked inside by human operators. Why it sucked? The work was brutally repetitive and physically exhausting. One wrong step and you'd tumble inside a wooden wheel 20 feet in the air. Mostly prisoners. Many operators were convicts, sentenced to hard labor. Some spent years walking in circles. Injury rate high. Falls were common, and the wheels could crush limbs. No breaks. Treadmill operators often worked in shifts lasting hours with no rest. 10. Sin eater, eating the sins of the dead. The job, when someone died, it was believed their sins could transfer to the living. Enter the sin eater, a person paid to absorb those sins. How it worked. A loaf of bread was placed on the chest of the deceased. The sin eater would then eat the bread and drink ale over the corpse, symbolically taking on the person's sins. Why it was awful? You were eating over a dead body. Sometimes bodies were days old and decomposing. Spiritual consequences. Sin eaters were feared as carriers of evil. People avoided them in life and refused to bury them in consecrated ground after death. Pay, pitiful, usually just bread, beer, and maybe a coin. Be grateful for your modern job. Sure, your boss might be annoying. Maybe your commute is long. But unless you're spending your nights waist-deep in human waste or being whipped for royal misconduct, you're doing all right. The medieval world was a place where horror and hardship were woven into everyday labor. There were no safety nets, no workers' rights, and certainly no therapy. And yet millions toiled on, often in silence, building the foundations of the world we now enjoy. So the next time you think your job is the worst in the world, just remember, at least you're not a gong farmer.